What is power without light? Question has haunted humanity since the beginning. In every age, in every culture, there were those who sought more than faith, more than patience, more than what heaven allowed. They whispered to shadows, bent herbs and fire to their will, and called it wisdom. But it was never wisdom. It was hunger, a hunger for control, a hunger to rewrite the boundaries between heaven and earth. And from that hunger was born a word that still sends shivers down the spine of mankind: witch. But behind the word lies a deeper truth. Witchcraft was never just about potions, charms, or curses. It was about rebellion, the same rebellion that began in the heavens when the Watchers desired what was forbidden, and Lucifer whispered, "I will ascend." Long before the bonfires of the Middle Ages, before the Salem trials, before whispered accusations in village squares, there was an older story, the story of power separated from light. When man first learned to call upon hidden forces, when knowledge ceased to be holy and became personal, the spark of witchcraft was born. The ancients called it many names. The Babylonians named it Kishpu. The Egyptians called it Heka. In Hebrew, it was Kashaf. But across every tongue, it meant the same thing: to control what should not be controlled. It is the oldest sin reborn in 1,000 forms. Some sought love, some vengeance, some healing, but all sought power, power without obedience. In dark rooms lit by candles, in forests where words were whispered to the wind, men and women reached out for something unseen, and something unseen reached back. Because darkness always answers when light is rejected, and though generations have passed, though the names have changed, the battle remains the same. Power without light always becomes corruption. In the days of Moses, witches were feared. In the days of kings, they were hunted. In the days of Christ, they trembled, for true authority had walked among men. Yet even now, in this modern world of reason and screens, witchcraft still hides behind new names: energy work, manifestation, divination, astrology, white magic, spirit healing. But the truth remains. There is no such thing as harmless darkness, for every spell requires an exchange, every spirit demands a price, and every time a soul turns away from divine power to call upon its own, the oldest war reignites, the battle for the soul. So tonight, as we pull back the veil of time, we will not only ask what witches do, but why power still seduces the human heart. This is not just history. This is not just mystery. This is revelation. The truth about witches, power, fear, and the battle for the soul. It didn't begin in the forest. It began in a garden. The story of witchcraft does not start with a cauldron or a curse. It starts with a conversation. In Eden, the serpent did not promise pleasure. He promised power. You will not surely die. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like him. It was the first spell ever spoken, not over a potion, but over a soul. Eve did not drink from a chalice. She believed a lie. And in that moment, the seed of witchcraft was planted in human history, the desire to possess divine knowledge apart from divine presence. Witchcraft, in its oldest form, was never about broomsticks or charms. It was about control. It was about taking what belonged to God and claiming it for self. And after the garden closed, mankind carried that hunger into the wilderness. Generations passed. The sons of Cain built cities. The descendants of Seth prayed in the shadows. But one truth remained. The fallen still whispered. They taught secrets to those who would listen. Ancient tablets from Mesopotamia speak of Kishpu, the art of commanding spirits through rituals and symbols. In Egypt, priests called upon Heka, the life force that flowed through gods and men alike. They used words to bend reality, believing speech itself could command creation. They were not wrong, for words have power, but power without holiness becomes corruption. And so temples became gateways, altars became laboratories of rebellion. The same angels who once fell in the days of Enoch, the Watchers, whispered forbidden knowledge to early kings. They taught the reading of stars, the crafting of charms, and the mixing of herbs for visions. It was the dawn of sorcery. In the plain of Shinar, mankind rose again, not in worship but in pride. They built the Tower of Babel, reaching toward heaven with human hands. "We will make a name for ourselves," they said. It was the echo of Eden. "We will be like God," and God scattered them. Yet the fire of that desire burned on. Across the world, new languages carried old spells. The Chaldeans, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, each built their own way to touch the divine without surrendering to it. They called their priests wise men, sorcerers, magi, but heaven called them what they were, men chasing power without light. The same spirit moved through centuries, from Nimrod, who defied God and founded Babylon, to the Pharaoh's magicians who turned staffs into serpents before Moses. But what the world called magic, heaven called rebellion, and every generation paid for it. Kingdoms crumbled, hearts hardened, and fear became a language humanity could not forget. Witchcraft was never simply about casting spells. It was about reclaiming what was lost in Eden: authority, wisdom, and power. But no one told them that to take power without permission is to take darkness into the soul. And so the cycle began, a war between light and shadow, truth and illusion. A war that would later be called the battle for the soul. For in every age someone still listens to the whisper, and every whisper still says the same thing. You can be like God, but there is always a cost. Always. Not all teachers are sent by God. Long after Eden's gates closed, man began to build again, cities, altars, and idols. But the most dangerous foundations were not made of stone. They were made of knowledge. The book of Enoch tells us that when the watchers fell, those angels who once stood in glory, they brought with them wisdom too heavy for the earth. They were supposed to be guardians, but pride turned them into corruptors. Semjaza, their leader, taught enchantments, how to invoke hidden powers through words and symbols. Azazel revealed metalwork, not to build, but to destroy. From his hands came the first weapons, and from his pride came the spirit of war. Barakiel unveiled the paths of the stars. Astronomy twisted into astrology. Kokabeel taught the constellations and how to call upon their forces. Armoros introduced the breaking of curses, yet through it, he taught how to curse. Penemu taught men the art of writing. A gift turned into deception and manipulation, and Castasia revealed how to use potions and roots, herbs that could heal or harm, visions that could open doors not meant to be opened. Knowledge became a weapon, and mankind, hungry for power, welcomed it. It was the beginning of what the ancients later called sorcery, a marriage between divine truth and demonic rebellion. From that union, witchcraft spread like fire. The women of the earth learned to adorn themselves, to captivate, to enchant. The men learned to forge, to control, to dominate. What was meant for beauty became vanity. What was meant for creation became destruction. The Watchers called themselves gods, and mankind believed them. They built shrines where incense rose to fallen angels, calling them by new names: Baal, Ashtoreth, Moloch, Ishtar, Artemis. But behind every name was the same rebellion, the same dark fire that burned since Eden. And as this knowledge spread, fear grew with it. For once you open a door to the unseen, it never closes quietly. The spirits that answered to the Watchers began to answer to men. And the men who listened became bound to them, slaves to whispers, chained by desire. Some sought healing and found possession. Some sought love and found torment. Others sought revenge and found themselves haunted. Because every spell has a price. Every pact signed in darkness is a contract written against the soul. Yet humanity continued to reach. In the plains of Shinar, in the temples of Babylon, in the pyramids of Egypt, kings rose not to rule men but to rival heaven. They built towers, summoned spirits, and declared themselves divine. But heaven watched, and the angels of light, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, beheld what the earth had become, a reflection of rebellion. The fire that fell from heaven once illuminated creation, now it burned it. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever." The world had traded its innocence for illusion, the illusion that power could be possessed apart from its source. And that illusion was called witchcraft. It was never truly about magic. It was about misplaced worship. For when man no longer bows to God, he bows to the darkness that imitates him. The same knowledge that lifted the Watchers now chained humanity. And what began as enlightenment soon became enslavement. The forbidden arts had returned the favor. They had mastered their masters. And in the heavens, judgment was being prepared. For no secret remains hidden forever. The fallen had taught mankind to call upon spirits, and now heaven would call upon them. The world forgot where it began, but it never forgot to fear it. Centuries passed, empires rose and fell. The names of the Watchers faded into legend, yet their influence lingered. A shadow in every culture, a whisper in every superstition. As the world grew older, faith and fear began to share the same table. The people of Europe spoke of curses, of spirits that could twist crops, sicken livestock, and steal children in the night. But behind those stories were older roots, fragments of the same forbidden arts passed down through generations, dressed now in secrecy and terror. And so began the age of fear and fire. The Middle Ages were not merely an era of kings and knights. They were a time when invisible wars raged in villages and hearts. Church bells rang by day, but by night whispers returned. Candles flickered in hidden corners, herbs hung from rafters, and words were spoken in tongues no priest would bless. People sought healing when physicians failed, love when prayers felt unanswered, control when life felt cruel. And they turned to what their ancestors had learned from the fallen, the old arts, the secret power. Yet, in the eyes of the church, every shadow looked the same. Fear became law. From the 13th century onward, witchcraft was no longer a rumor, it was an accusation. Women, especially the poor, the widowed, and the strange, were dragged from homes and beaten until they confessed to things they had never done. They were called servants of Satan, brides of darkness, consorts of demons. Some were guilty, yes. Some had truly opened doors they could not close, but most were simply victims of a world that feared what it could not understand. Between 1450 and 1750, tens of thousands were executed across Europe. In Germany and Scotland and France, the flames burned day and night. Priests preached of salvation, inquisitors spoke of purification. But in truth, both sides were afraid of the power that still lingered from the oldest rebellion of all. Witchcraft had never truly been defeated. It had simply changed its face. In castles and courts, kings kept astrologers, men who read the stars and guided wars by them. In villages, midwives were called witches for knowing the mysteries of herbs. The same knowledge that once came from angels now divided humanity between faith and fear. And in the heavens, the same battle raged, angels of light and darkness still contending for the souls of men. For every witch that burned, 10 more turned to the shadows in secret. For every trial held, more hearts hardened against compassion. The world had forgotten that witchcraft was never the root, only the fruit of rebellion. It was not born in the cauldron, but in the heart. The fear of witches became an idol of its own. Churches built on grace became courts of vengeance, and the flames that were meant to purify ended up consuming mercy itself. It was never truly about women or herbs or spells. It was about humanity's unending struggle with power. The same battle that began in heaven was now being fought in the streets of men, not with swords and spells, but with judgment and fear. Witchcraft had become the mirror of mankind's brokenness, and both sides, the accused and the accusers, had forgotten the truth. The real enemy was never flesh and blood. Darkness was not a woman in the woods, it was pride in the heart. And so, as one age ended and another began, witchcraft would take on a new form, no longer hunted, but welcomed. Because the next age would not fear it, the next age would celebrate it, and the ancient rebellion would rise again, wearing a new disguise. The flames have gone out, but the fire never died. When the last witch trials faded into history books, the world sighed in relief. The fear had ended, the screams had stopped. But something else had begun. Witchcraft had survived the centuries, not through covens or curses, but through culture. The same hunger that once drove men to altars and women to whispers simply found a new name. It no longer called itself sorcery. It called itself freedom. The modern age, the age of reason, enlightenment, and self, gave witchcraft a new cloak, self-power. No longer was it about summoning spirits in secret. It was about manifesting energy, controlling destiny, shaping reality through will. The ancient lie had evolved, but the whisper was the same. You can be like God. In the 20th century, new movements emerged. Spiritualism, astrology, New Age mysticism, crystal healing, Wicca. The same practices that once brought death to entire generations were now rebranded as harmless or beautiful. The stars once used for worship were turned into horoscopes. The charms once called talismans became energy stones. The rituals once condemned as pagan became self-care. And while the world laughed at the idea of witches in the forest, it unknowingly invited them into its living rooms through stories, screens, and songs. Television turned them into heroes. Books turned them into icons. Fashion turned them into symbols of empowerment. The image of the witch transformed from evil to elegant, from feared to adored, and the deception deepened. For witchcraft was never about aesthetics. It was about allegiance. Every practice that draws power away from the Creator, no matter how soft or glittering it seems, still flows from the same source of rebellion. The lines blurred. White magic was said to heal, dark magic was said to harm. But the truth is, both feed from the same well, the pursuit of divine power without divine submission. And this time, the battle for the soul would not be fought in courts or cathedrals, it would be fought in minds. In the age of science, man stopped burning witches and started becoming one in spirit. Manifestation replaced prayer, vibration replaced faith, the universe replaced God. The same cosmic vocabulary dressed in modern clothes. Humanity had simply rewritten its religion, one that worshipped self as supreme. But what many forgot is this: witchcraft never offers power for free. Every charm that works comes with a chain. Every spell that succeeds costs something sacred. And what's most dangerous about the witchcraft of today is not its darkness, but its disguise. For it comes smiling, dressed in light. It promises peace, healing, and freedom, yet it leaves the soul hollow, cut off from its maker. The old rebellion still breathes, not in the forests of Europe, but in the hearts of millions who unknowingly echo Eden's first words: I can be my own God. And while many see it as harmless art or ancient wisdom, heaven sees it as what it has always been, the battle for the soul of mankind. And that battle is not over. The war that began in heaven still wages within every heart, for the question remains, whose power will you serve? Every spell ever cast was really a question. Who do you trust, the Creator or your own power? That has always been the battle. Witchcraft is not just a practice, it is a posture of the heart. It is humanity saying, I will not wait on God. I will make my own way. That same spirit that whispered in Eden, that taught through the Watchers, that burned in Babylon, that hid through the Middle Ages and now dances through modern minds. It is the same rebellion wearing new faces. But there has always been another voice, a quieter one, a voice that doesn't demand power, but offers peace. It spoke to Elijah on the mountain, not in fire or thunder, but in a whisper. It spoke to Mary, not in ritual, but in grace. It spoke to Jesus in the wilderness, not through temptation, but through truth. And it speaks still to every soul who feels the pull between light and shadow. The greatest war is not fought with curses or crosses, but with choices. Every day, every heart stands between two altars, the altar of self and the altar of surrender. Witchcraft, at its core, is the worship of self. But faith, true faith, is the surrender of self. And that is why the battle for the soul is not fought outside us, but within us. Heaven and hell both wait for one thing: the direction of our will. You don't have to chant to be bound. You don't have to burn incense to invite darkness. You only have to believe that you are enough without God. That's the oldest spell in existence, the illusion of independence. but the light still calls. For every chain that witchcraft forges, the Spirit breaks it. For every curse that has been spoken, there is a word that cancels it. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The truth about witches has never really been about them. It has always been about us, the hearts that hunger for power, and the God who still offers grace. Because even those who once served darkness can still find redemption in the light. The witch of Endor found herself standing before a king. The magicians of Egypt bowed before the power of Moses. And one day, every knee will bow, not to spells or spirits, but to the one who holds all true power. The battle for the soul was never about potions or wands. It was about allegiance. Every man, every woman, every generation must choose. Will I serve the power that flatters, or the power that frees? For one brings control and chains. The other brings surrender and salvation. And though the world grows darker, the light grows stronger still, because no spell, no curse, no shadow can stand against a soul that has been claimed by truth. The truest magic is not in words, it is in faith. And when faith speaks, the darkness trembles. That is the real secret behind every story of witchcraft. The war between false power and eternal light. And in that war, there is only one victor. The light still wins, for all the centuries of fear. The truth was never in the shadows. It was always in the light. From Eden's garden to the towers of Babylon, from the fires of witch trials to the quiet glow of modern altars, humanity has always chased one thing: power. But every pursuit of power apart from God ends the same way, in chains. The serpent's whisper has echoed through every age, promising wisdom, control, and destiny. And each time it led to bondage dressed as freedom. Witchcraft has worn many faces: ancient priestess, midnight healer, modern mystic, but its essence has never changed. It is still the hunger to command what should only be received. And that hunger cannot be healed by knowledge, it can only be healed by surrender, because no darkness can drive out darkness, only light can. And no spell, no ritual, no charm can match the name that spoke galaxies into being. Jesus, the name before which every shadow trembles, the name that breaks every curse, the name that restores every soul that was once deceived. For the power of witchcraft is borrowed, the power of God is eternal, and when the two collide, the darkness flees. Maybe that's why witchcraft has always feared light, because light doesn't argue, it doesn't need to, it simply shines, and every lie is exposed. The witch who calls on spirits may hold power for a night, but the believer who calls on Christ holds eternity. So if the world feels darker, if confusion grows louder, if temptation whispers your name, remember this: only light can break the spell. And that light still shines. It shines over every generation that ever wandered into darkness. It shines over every soul that ever sought freedom in the wrong place. It shines over the ashes of the old world, declaring again the truth that hell fears most. The battle is already won. The same Jesus who silenced storms still silences the spirits of deception. The same spirit that filled prophets now fills you. And the same word that banished darkness still speaks life today, because witchcraft was never the end of the story. It was only the shadow that made the light easier to see. So stand firm, pray bold, walk in the light, for no power of darkness can bind a soul already claimed by the King of Light. And remember, beloved, every spell fades, but light remains. This is the truth about witches, power, fear, and the battle for the soul. If this story opened your eyes, share it. Let others remember that even in the darkest night, the light still wins. Subscribe for more cinematic stories that reveal what the world hides, because truth, once seen, cannot be unseen.